The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. I really want to do some videos about things that are great in the industry, things that are going well. The reality is it's very easy to get caught up in the negatives. It's easy to focus on things that are going wrong, the comics that are off track, the people that are doing weird shit. There's lots of good examples of things that are going sideways. At the same time, if you're somebody who loves comic books, meaning you love the idea of walking into a store, buying something, taking it home every month, reading a bit of a story, coming back the next month, the thing that maybe you should take to heart, and I understand that for a lot of you, this will feel like faint praise, or maybe that's the wrong word. It'll feel like nothing. The fact that comics still exist, the fact that there are still, magazines, comics, publications being published month after month, featuring characters that many of us grew up with, characters that, for many of us, including me, were created before we were born. I mean, if I think about this, I mean, I made lots of jokes about how old I am. I'm not that old, but all of the modern, the characters that we see from Marvel and DC were created long before I was born. I'm sure for many of you listening, you're in the same boat, long before you were born. And the fact that we can still go into a store and buy these things is kind of impressive. If you think about all the other things that are going on in life, whether they're hardware or software or media, I mean, hey, do you remember when you first bought a DVD? You remember that? DVDs are dead now. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I'm sure there's some nostalgia level stores that are still putting out DVDs, but by and large, DVDs are gone. And I think for many of you listening right now, DVDs are something that you remember going to a store and seeing this new technology and going, holy shit, what's this? This is way better than rewinding a cassette. That things have evolved, and yet for a lot of us, comics still exist. And it's important to recognize that as we're complaining, as we're talking about the various mismanagement of characters, and there's plenty of that, comic books have managed to survive. They're still published. There's a lot of things out there that are not. In fact, to put a deeper point on it, comic books really shouldn't have survived. There's lots and lots of reasons why comic books should not still be going today, and yet they are. And frankly, it's easier to put out a comic book than it's ever been. I know a lot of the people who do crowdfunding, portray we're doing a comic book that others won't let us do, or we can't work for the mainstream, so we're doing something for you. Look at Eric July. Eric July is somebody who Marvel is not going to hire. I think that's fair to say, right? I think it's safe to say that Marvel's not going to be dialing up Eric July to hire him. And yet, Eric July is able to go out there and make his own comic. Is that bad? Of course not. I think only a true psychopath would say this is a bad thing. It's a good thing that all kinds of different people can make comics if they want. You've got a story to tell. Good news. You can make a comic. You can get something out to market. You could tell your story. And the economics around it, with crowdfunding, with going to a publisher, exist. And so whether you absolutely despise the person making the comic, it's still a good thing that there's a mechanism for us to have comics. I think I've just introduced, by the way, two things that all of my audience, some segment of my audience, will hate. Those two things are, we should acknowledge that comic books are still being produced is a positive thing. Better than it being dead. If you love comics, this is my litmus test whenever somebody was complaining about comics. If somebody's like, I wish there were no comics. Yeah, you crossed the line there. No, it's good that comics exist. Even if I read none of the comics, I'm glad for comics to exist because they should. The other thing that's pissing people off is I think anybody should be allowed to make comics, no matter your politics, no matter who you are, no matter what you do. I think that you should be allowed to tell your story. And the reality is the marketplace does allow us to tell our story. Now, granted, Kickstarter or other, vehicles may, make it harder or ban us or block us, but there are other avenues. If you have a story and you want that story to get out, you can. It is not you're not blocked off from all avenues. Would it be better if all avenues were open? No doubt about it. No doubt about it would be better. But at the end of the day, if you have a comic that you want to tell, you can do it. You've got ways to do it. That's a good thing. At the same time, the indicators that comics are in a bad shape are all over the place. And I'm sorry, it's very easy for a multimillionaire or somebody who's been in an executive position at a big company or somebody who's an established writer that has made it and is, past the era of their career where, if they want to get work, they can get work. It may not be as high paid as they want, but they can get it. Despite all that, there is not a single day that exists where somebody in comics does not have a GoFundMe or some way to try and gain money because they are broke, can't afford rent, can't afford dental care, can't afford, mental therapy, whatever it happens to be, can't afford food. There is always, and there has been for the last 6 years, there has always been somebody online having to beg for cash who's in comics because they can't make ends meet. Now, you can argue, and I'm not even saying you're wrong, that a lot of people begging for cash and needing that money are not good writers. They're not successful in comics. They're not going to be successful in comics. They're not able to do what they need to do. That may be very true. But it doesn't look good on comics when you've got people who are in your industry, either directly or indirectly, begging for cash, who cannot afford to go to the doctor, who are fighting homelessness. That's bad. There is no way it's not bad. And, what we should do as people who are either in the industry or supporting the industry, we should stop pretending that this is all normal or passively ignoring it or maybe retweeting the GoFundMe like, hey, this person can use some money. In successful industries, you do not have this volume of high-profile people begging for cash because they cannot afford rent, who basically have to say, doctor bills are crushing me, and me or my family are going to die unless I can pay for it. Like that, you do not see that in other. Like I defy you. You can go to GoFundMe's, and there's lots of it, but you do not see people working for like Toyota Motor Company up there going, I work for Toyota, but I cannot. My teeth are falling out of my skull, and I cannot afford food. Please give me money. You don't see that. That there is something that has become attached and intrinsic to comics where people feel comfortable with having to beg for a living while still being a face and representative of comics. The latest is there's this guy here who is and I'm not going to draw attention too much, but a guy who is a writer for CBR, loves comics. Cites this as their dream job. A dream job. But then also notes that there's a budget change at work and less stuff is getting published. And I've lost money. My blood pressure is bad. I've gone to the ER. My family is dying. Listen to this. Listen to this line. And again, I'm not trying to identify the person, but it's somebody in comics, somebody who regularly goes out and tweets about bad people in comics, who tweets about how wonderful comics are, and yet has to write this sentence. I can't feed myself and buy things for my kids with good intentions. The money is going to go toward going to a doctor, getting a new laptop, and hopefully building up a reserve. By the way, this is the money the person is begging for. I need help. They're talking about how their vision is bad. The doctor says you need to go to a heart specialist, but this person can't because they can't afford it. I can't pay my bills. I can't take care of my kids. This is somebody in comics. Right now, we get to, go to Disney Plus and see an entire section devoted for comic book movies. Right now, if you go to a grocery store or Target or something, you get to see magazines on the shelf talking about like the legend of Spider-Man, or here's a bunch of stuff about Marvel, or let's celebrate comic book movies. You have people who are speculating if the next Marvel movie is going to be able to crack $1 billion. I don't know. What is the next Marvel movie? The Marvels? Captain Marvel movie. Captain Marvel 2, The Marvels. And people are going, I don't know. Could this make $1 billion? I'm not sure. It needs to make $1 billion. To be successful, you really need to make $1 billion. That's the discussion that is being had. Simultaneously, people in comics are saying, I can't afford food and my children are starving. Please give me money. Do you see the inherent problem there? So I think there's a lot of things to celebrate about comics, mainly what they are, the fact that you can make them pretty much anytime you want, the storytelling abilities, lots of those things. But all of us should stop kidding ourselves and, in some ways, stop with the culture war bullshit, because it's a distraction from the reality. The reality is there's too many people in comics very publicly who cannot afford to live and are having to beg for money to continue. And whether they're good writers, woke writers, bad writers, any of the above, that is a blemish on this industry. It is something that will forever keep comics as a niche. And if you are a successful comic creator, if you're Scott Snyder and you've got deals with Comixology and whatever the fuck it is, distillery, drill. If you're doing well in comics, first of all, good for you. But you're working in an industry where a lot of other people, either directly or indirectly, are having to beg for money to live. How in the world can you hold your head high and be in that industry? And I want you to think for a moment about your job. Maybe you're a programmer. Maybe you're a doctor, a lawyer. Maybe you're in college looking for a career. How do you think that works? How do you think that works if you are going into a career, you're excited to get a job there, you're hoping to build some reputation there and a good resume and everything else? How do you feel it? How do you think it feels to be doing that? And you got a bunch of your coworkers, your peers, who can't feed themselves. Imagine going to be a doctor and you're studying to be a radiologist, and you notice that a number of other radiologists are posting saying, I'm very skilled at my job and I've got a job with Kaiser or one of the big providers. And, but I can't feed myself. So please give me money so I can afford food. You would second guess that career choice, wouldn't you? I'll bet you would. So even if you are doing well in comics, this has to feel bad. This has to feel, and by the way, you could justify it any way you want. You could say, well, these people are all a bunch of fucking idiots and, they of course they're broke because they're morons. Okay, fair. There's morons everywhere. But all the same, there is a high percentage in comics, people in comics having to beg for a living. Beg for their survival. And we can't, as fans, we can certainly all day long until we're blue in the face say, this is what you get when you pick woke politics and blah, blah, blah. We can certainly do that. It may make you feel better, but at the end of the day, as a customer, you want something good to read. And as a person who's working in comics, you want someplace good to work. This is a problem. I don't hear a lot of channels talking about this. I see lots of other people, mocking people who are doing this. I get it. If you're really pissed off at how comic books are going, it is kind of funny that a lot of the people who called you a Nazi last year are now having to beg for food. There's some justice in that. I mean, unless you actually are a Nazi, and it's just weird, but I'm guessing most of you are not. That may feel fleetingly good, that, karma. But at the same time, I come to the party hoping to read comics. Well, it's certainly nice to have, Schadenfreude and karma and other things hit people who deserve it. I mean, put it this way, nobody is really going to shed a tear if Mark Brooks has to do a GoFundMe because he's behaved like such an asshole on Twitter. Okay? Nobody's going to really go, oh my God, I can't believe, I'm very sorry for this guy. No, you've been a prick. So a lot of people are just going to feel like you got your just desserts. But beyond the individual, this isn't good. I don't feel good reading comics, selling comics, being in comics, and knowing that a lot of people who are in this business, either as creators who are actually making the comics or people trying to cover the comics or whatever else, cannot afford food. That doesn't inspire me to love the comic. It takes me out of the moment. Trying to enjoy Spider-Man, not getting back together with Mary Jane. And instead, I'm thinking about a guy saying that, my children have a tooth infection. I can't afford to fix it. I'm worried they're going to die. Kind of takes the enjoyment out of these books. And so as much as there are some really amazing things in comics, and there are, particularly around kind of stories being told, easy access, the ability to kind of, get your dream on paper, put something out, billion-dollar movies are all really cool things. I do think those are really cool things. It takes away from it a bit when you see this stuff. And the reality is, and it is the reality, there hasn't been a break in the last 6 years where someone, and usually it's more than one person, in comics are having to beg to stay alive. Kind of takes away from the fun. Anyway. Yeah, I got serious. I understand all this stuff. I'll throw out one piece here. And I've talked about this with a few different people. Some people have written in. The culture war stuff, it's fun. I understand if you're excited about fighting it, more power to you. Increasingly, I think the culture war is an absolute smokescreen for getting the middle and lower class to fight each other while the people on top laugh all the way to the bank. And I can go more to that later, but that's how it feels half the time. It's a wonderful squabble where we all are fighting a good fight. And by the way, your reasons for fighting that fight, probably not wrong. First of all, most of it's your opinion. So your opinion can't be wrong. It's your opinion. It's your business. But while all this is happening, you've got people who are being blocked from creating the art they want to create. And you've got other people who are working for a legitimate company and starving to death. And so that feels like a problem. But again, maybe it's just me. Anyway, live stream and scrape the shit out of this, you fuckers. Thanks for listening.